Cool, so once your hips are feeling like a little bit looser from the squatting stuff, you can do some standing circles, really simple. You can also think about mobilizing your ankle as well. So if you think about your hip joint and your ankle joint, have a lot of movement in them. But if, say, for instance, one of them is really tight, then that can transfer a lot of the pressures through your knee joint, which is just a hinge joint. So it should move this way. It has a little bit of movement from side to side, but generally you want it to hinge. Yeah, you want to do it both sides. And then you could probably start doing some stool wedging. Obviously you could do some other workout stuff as well. Strengthening out your glutes is probably a good idea, so doing squats up and down is probably good too. And yeah, with regards to the stretching, you can do some standing stretches, which are like your obvious ones, so your quad stretching that you've probably done in PE on each side. The other thing you might want to do is stretch out your hamstrings. So it's pretty simple. You just head forward into like a forward fold, just move to the side so you can see. The knees are bent really heavily and the rib cage rests against the thighs. And then you're just literally pointing your legs up, lifting your tailbone up as high as you can go, and you'll still get a stretch even with a bent leg. And just let everything else hang out. I quite like doing this with some foot stretches too. So lifting your toes gives you a little stretch here extra on calves. And coming forward, obviously, it just gives your toes a little stretch out as well. You can work on your balance there too. So that's pretty nice. With regards to like stretching out the hips, lunges are pretty good for that kind of thing. And then also moving into like a half splits or a runner's stretch. So at the moment I'm in a low lunge with like my back foot relaxed. And I'm actually putting my knee over my toes because you get a slightly deeper stretch. But you can work on like the knee just being over the ankle if you want to work on strengthening instead. And then you can move into what we call like a lizard lunge. So you bring the foot out to the side, you can have it facing forward, but out to the edge of your mat's pretty nice as well. And again, just gently encouraging that knee into circle positions, and you can move this foot so that the knee and foot are kind of in line, especially if you're feeling like this sort of side to side motion is causing you a lot of issues. Circling the hip, getting down really low. And generally, like the concept with a lot of yoga stretching is to hold it for a little bit longer than you think, and also to release any kind of hold on an exhale. So just enjoying a little bit of a lizard lunge. The next thing you can do, you can actually transfer this straight into what's called Pigeon Pose. So you can take the outside of your calf, lay it in front of you. To start with, if your hips are tight, your heel will go towards your groin in this sort of position. But as your hip opens up a little bit more, you may find that you can open up this stance a little bit, so the knee can come out to the side, the hip will open, and the foot will come out in front of you a little bit more. If you're finding that you're kind of like sat on one butt cheek, then generally you want to kind of make this easier on yourself and level out your hips so that they're equally kind of lifted off the ground. So you might have a gap underneath there, and if that's uncomfortable, you can put a pillow, or you can work on your pigeon. Sometimes being upright feels great, and that's enough. Sometimes taking it forward can feel better. If you want to work on some strengthening, you could have a go at releasing your hands, taking them behind your back and opening up the chest here. As I said, you may find that that this feels better with less of an angle here. You can also do this sort of thing, if that's a bit too intense for you, by taking your foot, engaging sort of your toes upwards basically. So pointing your toes towards the ceiling, and grabbing that foot either on your forearm in your hand and your knee in your other elbow, and you can do some circles here instead, just working that area. And if you come onto the side, you can actually use it as a kind of pressure point. Eventually you may find that you can get that foot across your chest. You can get a slightly deeper feeling when you rock from side to side. And obviously you can turn that into a reclined pigeon or a figure four, drawing this knee away from you, drawing this knee towards you, keeping the feet engaged again, just to look after the knees as much as possible, and then taking the hands behind that leg. And obviously doing the same on the other side. You can do that figure four type position standing as well. So you can work on your balance at the same time. So finding that ankle in front of the knee and taking a bit of a stretch here. Obviously just going as deeply as you fancy. If this is enough for you, then that's fine. But you may find that this angle is just a bit much, so lying down might be easier. And you can also go for a little fold here if it feels like something that you want to do, which is nice. As well as that, you can also try eagle pose, which gets right into the outside hip area. So you kind of act like you need a wee. And you're bringing your leg across the other. You can even tuck the toes behind the calf and sink into that. This one's pretty nice in general, but it's even juicier on the ground. So that same kind of position from a seated stance instead. So you're crossing that leg over, bringing the foot up, and you add a little twist to the mix. So your bottom leg is with the toes facing upwards. Take your elbow, bring it around, and you can just keep it fairly loose here, or you can really get into it. And you'll start to feel this here, and you're trying to keep your sits bones, the bottom of your pelvis, grounded down into the mat and looking over that right shoulder. If you're feeling super flexy and your hips are allowing you to do this, you can bring the other foot around. And again, starting to feel that in the glute there. Super nice. And if that doesn't feel like something you can do, or you don't really fancy doing a twist, you can try a little bit of cow face pose, where the knees stack above the other, and you definitely feel that one. And that, again, might be comfortable, or it might be better if you lie back and draw your feet towards you. So one leg crossed over the other, and you're holding onto your feet. So just a few ways to stretch out your glutes and your hips. And then, of course, hamstrings, that standing stance is pretty good. Or seated stretches. If this feels too much, you can bend the knees, or you can elevate your hips with a pillow or a book, and you can take a strap around your feet and draw yourself forwards. If two legs feels too much, just take one leg out of the equation and head for your fold forwards. So what I quite like to do is bend the knee and reach for my foot or my calf. Allow this knee to open out to the side. Trying to get the chest against the thigh. And as I do that, I'm going to draw the kneecap up, so like I'm going to engage my quad. And as I do that, that allows the hamstring to kind of loosen up a little bit. Because often when we start stretching, our body kind of stops us. And you can also take that out to the side if you prefer a similar kind of thing. And then maybe you feel okay to do both. I usually do a little bit more warming up before I do these bends, but just for the demo's purposes. And that also gives you a nice stretch on your lower back as well. which might be tight too. So good things for lower backs, twists, lots of mobility, folding forwards, opening up the chest. And that's enough for now. Enjoy.